Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Activating Literacy with the Entire Family, a session that was presented at Children's Institute 2025 in Portland, Oregon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, welcome to Activating Literacy with the Entire Family. We are very excited for this panel and thankful that you came in to learn with us today. We have a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, the slides and handouts are going to be in your session details in the app. There is a survey. We ask everyone to please take a moment to do the survey. It gives really important information for the ABA for programming. Recordings for this event will be on BookWeb and on Booked. And also, in light of that, please make sure that you ask all of your questions or comments in the microphone so that they can be recorded. If you can, please do take one moment to silence your cell phones. But I know we've been in classes and at roundtables all day, so that's probably been done. And again, any questions, please wait for the mic. We do need to go over the antitrust guidelines. Booksellers are absolutely encouraged to share ideas and support during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits them from discussing price or pricing policies, boycotts, dividing up the market. And for more information, you can check ABA's full antitrust guidelines, which I'm sure you read from start to finish when you signed up for this conference. So today, we are going to start off with introductions. My name is Jamie Morgan. I have a bookstore, Baby Cakes Bookstack, located in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. We focus on children's literacy, family literacy, language and development. And we are a mobile bookstore, so we get to go from school to school and community to community.
Hello, everybody. My name is Federica Figueroa. I'm coming at you from Seattle from Secret Garden Books.
My name is Audrey Barbakoff, also coming from just outside of Seattle, and I am a picture book author and a librarian.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Hutton. I'm a pediatrician from just outside of Dallas, Texas. I'm also the founder of Blue Manatee Press. And I do research related to early brain development and reading and screen time also. So.
Thank you. So some of the additional things that we will cover are developmental foundations, environmental influences and practices, differences and challenges, supporting struggling readers, building lifelong habits, and what can you do about this as a bookseller, practical implementation. And then we'll have about 15 minutes for question and answer. So developmental foundations, we will start with John.
All right. So, this is a very broad topic, a lot of ground to cover. And, I feel like that we should speed this up to 3 times speed like you do when you're watching modules and we can all listen to us, just at accelerated rate. So one of our marching orders with today was to talk about how can booksellers, you all on the front lines, help promote early literacy, beginning in infancy through when kids are reading independently and then beyond to create families that read together. We know very much that children that grow up in households where reading is valued, where they see their grown-ups reading, will want to read themselves. They'll see it as more of something that's fun and nurturing. But it all starts really with what you see here. This is for lack of a better term, a literacy growth curve that we published in 2016, looking at the component skills that kind of stack on top of each other to support reading. And a deficit in any one of these skills can be the source of a reading difficulty. It all starts with language and infancy. The line across the bottom is when kids go to the pediatrician. That's what I am. I'm a pediatrician, so we kind of track that. So it starts with cooing, which is, saying vowel sounds, and then works its way into babbling, which is consonants. You put them together, and then you've got words, and then you're sort of off to the races. And then above that, you start thinking about how books work, and then on and on and on, learning the alphabet and other things. So how do you promote that as booksellers? It's really just starting with reading to babies. The American Academy of Pediatrics has recommended starting to read to babies as soon as possible after birth. It's often framed as at birth, but that would be kind of a little bit of an awkward situation. There was actually a PSA that showed that, and the dad's like starting to read, the Three Little Bears, and the mom's like, "What are you doing? I'm trying to give a baby here." Anyway, but the more words that a child hears, the more their language is going to develop, the more they're going to start seeing reading together as something that's just nurturing and valuable, and something that they want to do more and more. So just getting more books into the home. As far as reading to babies, though, it's really, it is important to frame expectations, because a lot of families that will try to read to a baby, it won't go well. And maybe they tried to read to a 4-month-old, for example, they're going to chew on the book, they're going to drop it on the floor, they're going to fall asleep, they're going to cry. But it's important to tell families that's okay, that's normal. It's all about just showing up and just creating your own routines that work for you and your family. Pick whatever books you want. I mean, babies, you can read them the phone book, you can read them, Goodnight Moon, whatever it is, but it's just, making it nurturing and enjoyable, and, just creating something that works in the home. And then just letting families kind of pick something that works for them. And then as those routines take hold, then you start getting more and more advanced books, and making the reading process more as interactive as possible is also something that's going to really be helpful. I could talk about this for like 7 hours, and I'm not going to do that because my co-presenters will hit me over the head with something heavy. But anyway, I think more than anything, it's just remembering you guys are on the front line to empower families to remember that reading is something that's fun, that reading is something is enjoyable. It's not just getting ready for school. It's not just something that you're going to be tested on that should be a chore. It's something that just should be joyful. So,
thank you. So I'll pose the question, at what age do children typically show readiness signs for reading? And how do these vary among different children, individual children? And any of the panelists can jump in on that as well.
Yeah, so readiness, so there's a term called emergent literacy, which breaks down into 3 categories. There's skills, which are the how to read. There's knowledge, which is sort of what a child brings to the table when they're hearing a story, their worldview and their experiences. And there's attitudes, which is the one that's often forgotten. So in terms of readiness, the things that kids would show, in terms of their skills, it all starts with language, just talking, the serve and return. Kids are going to listen first, and then they're going to start talking back in a good way. And as far as showing signs of readiness, it's just, they're ready. The kids are little sponges when they're little. They want to hear their parents' voices. One of the things that's very important, comparing a reader to a device, for example, the biggest deficits that you'll see in kids that have too much screen time tend to be expressive language deficits, because they're hearing lots of words, but they're not practicing saying them. Those are 2 different parts of the brain. So it's very important to create a back and forth process with kids. And as far as their sort of readiness to read, it's just all about the just looking into their eyes and realizing that they want to spend time with their grown-ups, and the book, more than anything, is a catalyst for the parent and child to spend time together and share an experience that's going to feel nurturing, where they're going to share language and feelings and other things. Older kids, signs of readiness to learn to read. There's all kinds of things. There's phonological awareness. There's learning their alphabet. There's learning letter sound knowledge. And in terms of showing signs of a deficit like dyslexia, that tends to show up mostly in the phonological skills. Kids that have trouble rhyming, kids that have trouble saying the sounds of letters. But I think kids are ready at all ages, and it's just empowering the grown-ups to be ready too.
If I can chime in on that as well, I think sometimes we overfocus on readiness, the idea being that we need to match a child to their lexile, right, or to their reading ability. But as a librarian, what I want to tell you is that reading ability is not fixed. Right. It is not like I have this, I fit into this box and I can read such and such words, and I should not attempt to read anything beyond what I am quote unquote ready for, because then I will get frustrated and I won't like reading. Interest drives so much. How many kids do you know, right, who can say can barely kind of mumble into their shoulder when you ask them, their name or their age, and then you ask them about dinosaurs, right? And like, I can't even pronounce half of this stuff. So really letting interest drive, and letting that interactive piece drive. Another piece about research on screens is that the adults behave differently when reading on a screen, that adults tend to interact less with kids when they're reading on a screen. They just read the words in front of them rather than saying, and why do you think he did that? Or, right, what do you think's going to happen next? Just an aside, but yeah, really letting interest and dialogue and that relationship drive and not getting too hung up on kind of what their readiness level is.
All right. And so what pre-reading skills are most important to develop before formal reading instruction begins? I heard John began to touch on that. Are there any other pre-reading skills that are important for development?
I mean, this is John's slide, but do you?
I mean, again, I don't want to get step on anyone's toes at all. I think in terms of pre-reading skills, I mean, that growth curve you saw at the beginning really is supposed to show that there's so much that's going on under the hood in kids starting when they're infants. I mean, it really, their language, but then some things are more malleable through experience and some are more genetically wired. Like phonological skills tend to have a strong genetic basis. Kids that have a family history of dyslexia are very high risk of having it themselves. But as far as the pre-reading skills, I mean, kids obviously need to learn their alphabet. I mean, that's something that happens. They should know like 10 letters when they go to kindergarten, and hopefully they know all of them when they finish. So they have to know their letters. They have to know the sounds the letters make. That's even more important because a lot of parents say, oh, my child knows their alphabet, they're ready. But they need to know the sounds to break the alphabet code. They need to know how books work, that they have beginning, middle, and end. So that's getting their reps in with, just practicing reading a lot of stories together. But as far as them reading themselves, I mean, you've often seen with the younger kids, a lot of them will pretend like they're reading. They'll take the book that they've heard a million times that they've memorized, and parents will say they only want to read the same book over and over, and that's because they're going to learn it, and then they're going to read it back, even though they're not reading the words. They're going to go through the process. So anyway.
So do you have the slide with the 6 early literacy skills on it? I think I could speak to that now. Yeah, 6 skills and 5 practices. So I won't get into the 5 practices yet, but these 6 skills of early literacy, so these were defined in the original Every Child Ready to Read research, which is freely available online. It was put together by ALSC, which is see if I can untie the alphabet soup knot here, the Association of Library Services to Children and the Public Library Association. So these are both under the umbrella of ALA, the American Library Association. And so these skills, right, these are essentially the names for what John was just talking about, right? Phonemic awareness, letter knowledge, print awareness, which is like just how does a book work? And by the way, chewing on your book counts as print awareness. Print motivation, so those just having those loving moments, even if no one appears to be kind of learning anything on the surface, right? And I don't remember now which ones I've said and which ones I haven't. And narrative skills. And this is one you can really emphasize during, with kind of the dialogic reading that John talks about. Pausing as you're reading in your story times, right? You've got maybe kids and you're reading with them in an event. To pause as you're reading and say, what do you think's going to happen next? Or why did they do that? Or how do you think that character is feeling? Right? Simple. They can be simple, right? One word, happy, sad. Doesn't have to be a dissertation. But getting kids to engage with the story and sort of predict and dig into the story, that's a reading skill as well. Because if you can't understand what's about to happen, how are you going to decode the words around it? So I would say these are the primary pre-literacy skills.
Right. And what impact has screen time had on literacy?
Oof. So the slide earlier that showed the brain pictures that we've done, and this was in Cincinnati when I was on faculty there, we published the only studies in the world to date showing how reading practices in the home and then alternatively screen time impact early brain development. This is in preschool age kids, and they were all over there with New York Times and CNN. And essentially, like the reading ones, we're using very high-tech methods to verify the obvious, which is that reading is good for you. And now you can see pictures that show where the brain lights up and, point at that and say, this really works. Screen time, on the other hand, we found negative effect on how the brain's, on the wiring of the brain, on the function of the brain, the processing, because the brain processes things very differently when they're on a screen compared to in the real world. It's just how humans evolved. The brain is essentially an analog organ. I mean, it evolved to do certain things well, which is to process our senses, interpret risks, do verbal and nonverbal communication. So in terms of how it impacts literacy, it really gets in the way of that human interaction that's so important. And that's the ace in the hole you guys have as booksellers is devices do a lot of things really well, but they can't replace that human back and forth. And the book is just really, like I said, a catalyst for that. It's like you get a book there, it doesn't do anything unless you make it do something, unless you bring it to life by reading it. And so then the child listens, the parent reads, and then back and forth. So it tends to be too one-directional from screens where kids hear a lot of words and they touch screens, but they're not talking, they're not asking questions, they're not going beyond, especially when they're little. And the 0 to 5 range really is the most critical, I think, when you're most likely to have the biggest negative impacts. And so the more we can keep screens away, the better. And that's happening more and more in Europe, where they're getting more and more strict with restricting digital devices with younger kids, because there's in the US, we have to prove things are bad for you before we take them off the market. And there they have to prove that they're not bad for you before letting kids have them. So.
Right. And like Audrey mentioned, there's a lot less interaction between the adult and the child when you're using a screen. And we will touch later on because we are in a world where screens are very prevalent, how can we help with literacy? Let's see. So environmental influences and practices, we already touched a little bit on that first slide there with Audrey. Can you tell us some more about this reading with babies that you have?
So this is an acronym. So this is back to that sort of AAP, start reading to babies as soon as possible after birth. And one of the concerns there is if you encourage a family and then it doesn't go well, you try to read to your baby and they cry and you're like, well, we must not be a good reader. Maybe my child doesn't like books. Maybe we picked the wrong books. We did it wrong. Let's just turn on an educational show and that'll work better. So SHARE STEP is an acronym that's meant to frame expectations around what reading to a baby realistically looks like, where SHARE stands for snuggle, lets baby hold the book if they can, show affection, respond to what they do, and then enjoy. And then the STEP part is how to respond to the baby. It's stretch words out, use the parentese, all that silly language you do when you're talking to a baby. Talk about the pictures, explore word sounds like choo-choo noises and dogs barking, make it really fun and goofy, and then be patient. This is a stealth training manual from Blue Manatee Press where it's all share this book, so it comes across there. In Spanish, it's compartir. So it's just really taking the pressure off of parents and realizing that it can be messy, but you just show up, you do your best, and the babies are listening and they're doing the best they can at their age. And it's going to evolve, as they get older and more able to participate. And then it dovetails into dialogic reading, which is more the back and forth.
All right. And in what ways can bookstores engage readers and older children in read aloud opportunities?
We're kind of talking about maybe like book selling events or maybe just like hand selling, talking to customers.
Both of those.
I think when I'm in the store and I'm thinking about, we kind of can show off a book, talk about it, but also show the parent how we might read to it at a read aloud event. And I think, having either that acronym, like, hidden up your sleeve or something might help you remember. That can give the parent some confidence when they go into themselves or a grandparent, or maybe it's auntie or the uncle. And so that's one way I try and encourage them. I think another way is if it seems like maybe there is some hesitation toward it. I just brought some books from the store, trying to find like the right kind of book for the age, right? So like if like I have question all the time, I got to get a baby present. and I bring them the board book, and they're like, oh, I want something nicer. Or like, they have this idea of what's a great baby present, and I want to honor that and give them what they want. However, I want to educate them as much as I can. So like getting books that are like great for babies' hands, like an Indestructible or maybe a board book, and then maybe a classic that's for like engaging, like Press Here, which again, it's like a 2-part thing, right? So those are just some of the ways. What about you, Jamie?
Well, read aloud time, what I do in my own home. I have a 12-year-old now, and we started reading when she, not in the birthing room, but pretty soon thereafter. And what read aloud looks like for us, and what I encourage families in the store, is to use character voices and make it engaging for the children who are listening in. And this doesn't stop at infancy or once the child learns how to read. Currently, my daughter and I, we read chapter books together, and we read 1 chapter each evening. And it leaves her with a cliffhanger, and she anticipates that time that we're going to come back and read the next chapter. And they're watching your eyes as you're looking at the book. And that is a very different process when you're looking at an actual book versus when you're looking at a screen. And it tracks differently for babies. But I would just say that effective read aloud time across the ages includes putting in the time to actually do it and make it a part of the routine, and encouraging, as booksellers, encouraging our families who come in to do the same.
If I can add, and I'll have a moment of shameless self-promotion here because I'm going to reference my own book that's coming out in a few months, Mazel Toes. And so what made me think of it is Press Here, which is one of my all-time favorites. But for adults who are maybe feeling a little like not sure how to do that interacting, or if you want to model it, is using books that have essentially instructions in them, right? So I wrote Mazel Toes, essentially thinking about the caregiver is going to touch various parts of the baby as they read this book, right? My love runs from your kepi, right, to your Mazel Toes, right? Polki, you squish polkies, which are chubby baby thighs in Yiddish. So where at Press Here, it says, shake the book, right? Tap this dot. So you can pick books where that give you some scaffolding or give parents some scaffolding for that. If you're leading a story time and modeling this, especially with babies, get yourself a baby. And by baby, I mean stuffed bear, moose, and model, like actually bounce, do your lap sit with your teddy bear, or, whatever cute toy you have on the shelf.
Right. And I do really think that as children get older, having them read aloud back to you gives the opportunity for back and forth. It gives the opportunity for you to hear the pronunciation and understanding and comprehension of what they're reading. Oftentimes, as readers, if you're reading to yourself, you can be very assured that this word is pronounced a certain way. And then when you hear it out loud, you're like, oh, that's not how it was pronounced at all. So reading aloud with older children and allowing them to read back to you is a great way to make sure that they are pronouncing words. And when you prioritize it in your home, then it can create a reading habit for yourself if you allow them to see you reading. And then they'll know that that's a good way to spend time.
Yeah, so there are a lot of myths around reading with kids that I've presented to some community groups, and I've always been surprised that a lot of parents are really worried about not reading the right way. And if the child asks questions during the story, is that rude? Should they just remain silent during, sit still? And that's completely opposite to the main benefits of reading aloud to older kids, the dialogic reading concept, that there's really strong evidence that helps build vocabulary, interest in reading, comprehension, school readiness, so many things. And it's actually a structured method that was developed to help kids from families that are more have fewer resources around reading, and it's been shown to work really well. So that's my shameless promotion. We have a series of books called DR books that are dialogic reading, where there's 5 of them, and they actually force the reader to read using dialogic principles. And they don't realize it's like a stealth training manual, but that's what it is. It sort of like makes them go through and get the child involved Anyway, and so it works. But anyway.
Absolutely. So in what ways can bookstores engage older children in read aloud opportunities? I think we tend to have read alouds for younger children. How can we get the middle school kids and or even before middle school, if they're in elementary school and already reading, how do we get them engaged in read aloud opportunities?
Yeah. Something that I was really proud to be a part of in Austin, Texas, where I moved from, was a Barrio Writers Workshop, which is a creative writing workshop that was free for historically disadvantaged populations. And we would only teach BIPOC authors. And it was a free college level course, like over 1 week. And we focused on identity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times we would have parents or family members kind of drop their student off and just say like, oh, they're just not a reader, they're not a writer, they need to work on this. And that's, of course, you never want like an unwilling participant, but but by the end of the week, those youth would have sometimes some of the like most amazing transformative pieces. And so something that I would love to see, if the capacity is there for you, more bookstores or working with local authors, is how can I have an event or just a moment in the bookstore where I am engaging an older population with something that is either like having some kind of mentorship, right? That is like cost effective. For example, like I was talking with these folks about Ben Clanton, who's here, and a co-author of his, Andy, I'm forgetting all the last Mooser show. Yes, I think, sorry for mispronunciation. And before they started reading their picture book to us, they had like a sort of exquisite corpse sort of drawing with the kiddos, right? And I talked to Ben and I was like, would you do that, but would you do it at like the narwhal and jelly kind of version where it's like you can ask them to create their own stories or ask them to create their own comics? And that's when Jamie was telling us about, I believe you're saying, maybe it was your family, like making comics, mm-hmm. right? Like fan fiction. Mm-hmm. Fan fiction's really big, right? And when a youth is waiting for the next edition to come out, what are you going to do? It can be, I think you were even talking about doing it over dinner, maybe like brainstorming, or you can, at your own store or library, you can ask them, do you have something like this where my youth can come in and write their own comic, right? So I think there's definitely like levels to engage the older youth. But I remember from last Winter Institute, there was a panel I was on talking about how to engage the middle grade like gap, right? And a lot of the like fall in individual reading was when the parents or the caregivers or this community wasn't reading to the children anymore. And so I still think that something that's really important is to think about all the other opportunities we can give folks coming through the doors of the store or in the libraries if you're not available to like, I can offer you this like coupon to Libro FM because audiobooks are still reading, right? If you're realizing that the child like has been diagnosed with dyslexia or maybe dysgraphia, which my wife has, right? How can they then participate in something like this? Maybe it's someone has the book and someone has Libro FM and you buddy read together. Yes. There's also, I brought from Seattle Arts and Lectures is a lecture series, and they put out these like summer bingos. So we didn't even have to work for this. We just had to ask them to mail us stuff. So this is the teen version, this is the kiddos version, and then the adult version. And they send it in for like a little reward, right? For a raffle. You could do that too, right? I know a lot of bookstores already kind of have that. It's Googleable. You can just kind of like copy paste and do your own thing. Jamie, you were talking about recipes, and I loved that you were kind of doing that too.
Yes, absolutely. So family literacy doesn't have to just be reading. In my mind, even learning the words of a song together or doing a recipe while you're cooking together, that also gives math literacy skills. Anything that you are doing that involves reading is going to count as literacy. So even if you're watching television, you can incorporate having the subtitles or the captions on, or watching foreign films with the subtitles on, or even doing some language learning, like Mango, which is a library. You can use your library card to get Mango for free, or Duolingo. So all of those things count as family literacy and can really engage them in literacy. And regarding the drawing your own comics, there are some that are fanfic, and then there are some that are just blank slates, and they allow your kiddo to go in and draw their own comic. And it has the frames in it. And I sell quite a few of those in my store. There are always children who are creative in that way. And so that is absolutely a way to engage older children in family literacy.
What you just said, it's so important to me, and I'm going to just like soapbox for a second, but reading is reading is reading. Audiobooks are reading. Comic books and graphic novels are reading. Books that have annoying branded characters on them are reading, right? Like they're still developing, they're hearing language, they're learning words, they're developing empathy, right? They're working all those muscles. I think so often we have people come in and like parents come in, they're like, well, my kid reads at a really high level, so now I want them to like read War and Peace, and they're 7. Like, reading is reading.
Absolutely. All right, so our slide here says, how do I read right with an older child? Parents may ask, is it rude for the children to ask questions? Can I talk about the pictures? Can I ask questions, or children may ask, in fact, can I ask questions that aren't in the book?
So this is a graphic from a talk about dialogic reading. This is back to that same concept, which addresses a lot of those myths around reading interactively, that all these are all actual questions that was asked in some of these community sessions, and and it's just getting back to that idea that the more the book can be a catalyst for dialogue, especially with younger kids, the back and forth, the more robust and the richer the experience, and the more the child's going to get out of it. So, but yeah, dialogic reading sounds complicated, like something really clinical, but it's one of my favorite stories was in one of these same sessions. This really fiery grandma came up to me afterwards, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about with all this dialogic readings nonsense. She goes, aren't you just talking about fun reading? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's basically fun reading.
All right. And let's see what our next slide is. So 2 out of 2 doctors on this panel agree listening to an audiobook is, in fact, reading. All right. So a bookseller's role in supporting literacy. Booksellers know that kids need to enjoy what they read and find books that engage with their interests. So we had a pre-meeting where we kind of discussed these things that we wanted to share with you today. And we came up with some of these points. We want to meet the parent or guardian where they are and validate their concerns. So just as Audrey said, some parents will come in and they say, oh, my child reads at a 12th grade level or a college level. And then here is this little tiny person. And they're like, well, I just want to read Dog Man. So we don't want to invalidate the parents' concerns, but we also want to meet the child where they're at and point the parent toward discussion questions and encourage them to read along with their child. Right. So, how to approach reading for different learning styles. So, we touched very briefly, Fede, you touched on this. Can we discuss this? How do we approach reading for different learning styles?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot of this, but for me, I'll go back to that slide that we had on like the 6 skills and the 5 practices. That those 5 practices, right, are things that we can all do. It's not just sit down and read a book. It's talk, sing, read, write, play, right? Any ways that we're engaging with language together. So, just validating that any ways that we're using language and using words is ultimately supporting reading, even if that's not what we're doing in the moment.
So what is the difference between supporting reading development and putting pressure on a child to read?
That's such a really, really critical point that, you'll see it like again, pediatrician, when you're talking to families in the exam room and you're asking them how school's going and everything. And then you bring up the notion of reading, are you guys reading together? And it's almost like they freeze up, like they have to get ready for their tests. And, especially like third grade tests, kindergarten tests. And if that's the perception of reading that the child has, as they're growing up, that it's something that's a chore, that it's hard, it's, something they're going to be tested on, then they're not going to want to do it. And so the more you can frame it as, demystify it, that it's actually an enjoyable way to spend time together, reading whatever book works for you and your family and whatever you see yourself in, wanting to learn more about, then that's great. That's what you should totally do. And the learning styles is one of my concerns currently, and this came out of COVID and I got put on steroids in COVID, is all the laptop-based learning that you're seeing, especially in younger kids. And you'll hear that all the time, that kids have different learning styles where they don't learn very well through remote platforms. They can't really get it off their laptop. They need to write it down. They need to sort of hear it interactively through a real book or with a real person or teacher. And there really has been almost no studies showing that laptop-based education is effective. It's just we've invested a ton of money into it, and so they want to keep doing it. And it's easier, and it's just, more efficient, I guess, in terms of getting everybody together. But that's the pushback y'all have is using books that are tried and true. They're tested. They can be hard for some kids, but they allow more flexibility in terms of being able to go off script and talk beyond the book and different kinds of books. We need to stay anchored to that, I think, especially with younger kids, because otherwise a lot of kids are going to really struggle.
I think it's, especially as your position as a bookseller, because so much of it is customer service. And this is like a really prickly is not the quite word, but parents can get very prickly, right? When you're suggesting something, it's not what they want, it's not what they want. You're not a mind reader. And at the end of the day, this is a very short interaction sometimes, but you do want them to you want to retain, right? Because that customer and build relationships, hopefully, is something that you want to do too. So I think within that, going back to the question, if the child is there, which often they are, who is in charge of this conversation, right? And what you can kind of see, what conversations has the parent had with the child already? When they're walking around the store, we want a serious book. That might be your sign that there's been a lot of pressure. Maybe there's been some struggling with reading, you don't know where. If there's that thing, maybe you go to Newbery Award winners. It's going to make the parents happy. But you can still ask the child who's there, because they're a real person. You shouldn't say what does your child like to read if they're right there, right? Mm-hmm. So defer to the real customer, right? They may not have the money, but like we were saying earlier in a lot of the conversation we had today, children are so oppressed. And so I was like, my favorite book was Captain Underpants, right? And the parent might go, whatever. But, I think it'll help that child at least trust you and trust your store. And eventually that might trickle down to the parent. That question, what do you like to read? Instead of what would you like your child to read? Maybe that parent will learn from you talking to the child that they are not quite thinking of with the child's well-being in mind. Exactly.
And for whatever reason, it's popping into my head that currently a tablet or a device is like ice cream for the kids, and they want to use it and they want to eat it all the time. But reading is often framed as kale. It's when you're going to get off your tablet and go read something, and it's I don't want to do that. It's gross. And we need to better frame reading as more like blueberries. Something that's tastes good, but it's also kind of good for you too. So just thought of that.
Love that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So before we go past this slide, Audrey, you were, I believe you were talking about high interest, low reading level books.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about kind of the different types and options as you're doing that hand selling and thinking about what is the book that's going to be the right fit for this kid, thinking about kind of those different formats. So certainly graphic novels, right? We know are often an entree for our reluctant readers or for kids who feel like reading is a chore, but that's not reading, that's a comic, right? But also high-low readers. So high interest, low reading level. If someone is struggling with reading, but they're 12, they still want to read books for 12-year-olds, right? 13-year-olds, they don't want to read boring baby books, right? From their perspective. So those high lows can be really, really great. Great for that.
Absolutely. And pairing a novel with its graphic novel can also introduce older children to reading books and staying engaged with it, because that's a high interest book. And kind of a gateway into reading the novels.
I think especially when a lot of books seem gendered. I know that like they'll be like, what books do you have for boys in middle grade? And even today when I was being pitched books, no shade, I was just trying to think, well, there's not a lot of books here that parents who are going to come in with like a sort of very traditional boy. There's not a lot of books that I could like give them. It's going to be a harder sell, right? Even though I think it would be great no matter the obvious, what I think is the gender of that character. So I think too, it's like make your publishers and sales reps work for you. Like you're very busy, most likely, and you can't read every book and every back of the book and have a shelf talker for everything. So I don't know, like I think it would be great to send an email and be like, hey, so-and-so, like, do you think this would be a good crossover book? Or, hey, I really want notes on, let's say, Edelweiss for that kind of thing. I think that the publishers should be working for us in that way to know what our interest is, because they can't know that we're interested in that kind of data if we don't tell them. They're probably just trying to think of like, this is my normal pitch and it's always worked. So
Right.
And let's break those gender norms as well, right? I have a 5-year-old boy, and he loves all if it's about farts or poop, like we've checked it out from the library 100 times. He also really loves the Glam Pre-Racers book, which are graphic novels about like sparkly fairy girls who are also drive race cars on an island made out of gears. And he loves the Princess in Black books, right? And so if someone came in and was like, well, I need a book for my 5-year-old boy, we might not reach for the Princess in Black books, so if that's what kind of the framing that we have. So let's make sure that we're letting kids explore and follow their interests and their agency, kind of regardless of what the spine label might be.
Right, because kids need to enjoy what they're reading and engage with their interests. So we also, as what you were bringing out, Fede, is that publishers do have resources for us, and we can search the educator guides and activities from publishers as well to find information to share with families. In my store, we have a handout that we give to parents with young readers, but I am actively working on coming up with a handout to give to parents with older readers, because it always helps as a parent to have some guidelines or suggestions for how to continue to engage your children with family literacy, with reading. Also, knowing what exists in your community, like tutors and writing groups. I know as bookstores, we have space that we can engage those type of activities in our store. I know of some bookstores that have tutors that come in to teach the children, and writing groups, as you were saying. I just absolutely love that idea of the writing group and how it really drew the children out. All right, building lifelong reading habits. So again, meet the child where they are in their reading journey. Include the parent, but a parent may ask for advice when they want it, and that's our entry as booksellers, not before and not at all if they don't ask. And take them to their interests. Like you said, give the children some kind of agency that they can say what they are interested in reading. And making author events interactive. Have you had any experience with that? Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think that these are ways that will have the youth come back. Like we had at the Bodio Writers Workshop, like we had youth that started, because it was 13 to 21 and then 13 to 18, from 13 all the way up to 21. I mean, that was success for us, because we're like, damn, excuse my language. But that's great that this youth wants to spend 1 week with books and writing their own, So I think kind of like you had said earlier, being consistent, right? Having consistency, even though you're like, it's probably not going to work out the first time. I'm sure you can speak more to that. And yeah, like having these opportunities. And when the parents see that, then it's also worth their time to do the, carting back and forth and all of that. I think the parents get really excited too when you can have an event celebrating that. Like at the end of the workshop, we always had a live reading where we would invite anybody, friends and family. And if we had the budget, we would get, barbecue because it's Texas. And so we gave them a free meal, like a show. And then at the end, we had grant money to have an annual anthology publication.
All right. And we can do the same for the adults. When parents model reading habits, a child will more likely engage with books and reading. So supporting multilingual families. My bookstore, we carry 20 to 25 different languages in the store at any one time, which is no easy feat because we have to do a lot of research to find books in that many languages. And my bookstore is mobile in a bookmobile, so we don't have a lot of selling space. So it's very intentional for me to carry books that are in different languages and that are bilingual. So we hold culturally specific story times and provide bilingual books. What are some of the ways that you can support literacy with multilingual families?
Well, I think one of the first things that we emphasize, see a lot of families from English as a second language backgrounds that aren't as comfortable speaking and definitely not reading in English, is to really encourage them to read in whatever language they're comfortable reading in. Mm-hmm. So there's no requirement that someone read a book in English, because they're in America. I mean, read a book in Spanish, read a book in French, whatever, because whatever language you're reading the book in, it's going to build the same network in the brain. Like the reading network doesn't care what the specific language is. It just is all about the pathways and the connections between the words and the sounds and everything. So definitely right off the bat, just encouraging read whatever's comfortable and just, again, keep reading a comfortable, fun, enjoyable, nurturing thing.
And I'll chime in as someone who is writing books that include a couple of languages. So when I'm writing, what I'm thinking about, and my books are not bilingual entirely, but they include a fair amount of Yiddish and have a glossary in the back. For a lot of families, this is bringing cultural relevance into their reading, right? So it's less about kind of the language learning and more about being like, hey, those are words that my grandma uses, right? Or that my parents use, or that I'm hearing in my family. And hey, these are kids like me, and I'm seeing my culture, my background and my identity reflected, right? And that windows and mirrors aspect. So we can also think about that not just as a kind of decoding the words, right? Like what language are you comfortable reading, but also what are the cultural implications, right? Who feels seen when they see their language, even if it's not a totally bilingual book, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's just a few smatterings, if it's Mazel Tovs or if it's something like Besos for Bebe, right? Blanca Gomez, just helping kids feel seen and see each other.
Right. And I know in my store, because we carry so many different languages and the Twin Cities is very diverse, we have a large population of immigrants and refugees in the Twin Cities, that I will often ask families who come in the store, what languages do you speak in your home? And I direct them to our language section, because people often do connect with the material better if it's in their mother tongue. And also, it takes away the stigma of reading with your child if English is not your first language. You can read with your child in your native language, or even if you are reading English books, if you start off very young, then you're learning with your child. It takes away that feeling of, I don't want my child to think that I'm stupid because I don't speak the language that they're learning in school. All right. So I think that we're going to cover practical implementation very quickly. Let's see. So how can families maintain reading momentum during summer breaks or other disruptions?
Sign up for your library summer reading program. Woo!
The bingos.
Yeah, I think that to the greatest degree possible to gamify it, just to set a challenge for kids to read a book a week or whatever it is, and keep a tally of it, and just make it a fun activity like that.
Right, and I know there was the impact of COVID has lasted longer than the pandemic itself. Do you think that readers can catch up?
I mean, the brain is very plastic at that age. I mean, it's the most plastic 0 to 5, but then it's, it's never too late to catch up with anything. I mean, I might be able to catch up with a lot of things that I didn't do when I was a kid, but it's unlikely. But yeah, for kids, especially ones that fell behind during COVID, I mean, there's definitely ground to make up, but, it's never too late to implement healthier habits. So.
All right. We are going to go to question and answer, but any last things you want to share briefly?
So I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but anyone that's interested in reading milestones, we actually have a book coming out in the fall, Billy the Brain Learns to Read, that shows all the different skills coming online at different ages and what's happening at the brain at that particular time. So it kind of ties the two things together for anyone that wants to know more about how the brain is wired for reading. There you go. So, cute character.
Thank you. So booksellers, this is a call to action. If you don't know what to do with all of this information, here are some ideas. We weren't just having a conversation. We are sharing information that you can take back to your stores and implement to help families with family literacy and getting that 15 minutes minimum of reading together each day. Research and bring in high-low books for older readers. Create a read aloud display for younger and older kids. Research books in other languages that also exist in English, and keep track of those because you may have a higher need for those books in your stores than what you know. Create a display pairing young readers' editions with adult titles, and refresh your story time. Figure out some ways to incorporate some of these fresh ideas that came off of the stage into your story time. So for question and answer, please remember, if you have any questions, to please come to a mic, or a mic will be brought to you.
Hi, I'm not sure how to phrase that, but I wanted to ask, and maybe this is a direct one for you too, but anyone, for kids who are differently abled, and how to support the parents in the literacy for that. So it could be autistic, it could be CP, it could be something like that, but just experiences you've had that helped encourage families with kids that may have those challenges to keep reading. So that's it.
The first thing that comes to mind is that just there's a maximum in pediatrics that children are not small grown-ups, but it also applies that all children are different in terms of their learning styles. Autism essentially is a language-based difference. So autistic kids are on the spectrum, they may not be certainly not able to sit still as well or hear a book. So that's where an audio book or something that's simple, that has a musical component to it, can be very effective. Just having that in mind, and just again taking the pressure off parents that reading is not monolithic. Not every child needs to do it the same way, and you can't expect every child to like the same books or to read the same way.
And having books that have characters who are relatable to a range of children.
What is your most diplomatic response to a parent who comes in and says, we got to get our kid off of graphic novels? I don't want to like preach to them, obviously, but I do want to encourage them to like let their kid keep reading stuff that is interesting to them, whether that's finding something that has pictures as well as text. But do you guys have a good response to that question from the parents?
A lot of times it's just trying to have the conversation with the kid, right? Like give them that choice and agency. Well, what do you like to read and what do you like about these? And maybe offering them some options that build on what they do like, that include both graphic novel and non-graphic novel options. They'll pick the graphic novels, but the parent is happier that at least they've sort of seen those things. Sometimes they're just looking for validation from you. Like they feel like they're not doing a good job as a parent because their kid is reading the quote unquote wrong thing. So making sure that they have the encouragement from you. Hey, graphic novels, kids are still getting all of those same benefits. Don't worry, right? They're getting a lot of vocabulary, right? They're getting a lot of narrative skills. Like they're building the skills they need. And then the last tack I would recommend is there's an increasing number of graphic novel versions of more classic literature. And that can also kind of help the hesitant parent, right? Like, well, I can't say no to Pride and Prejudice, right? Or to, I think that I've seen a version of that, right? So something that they will recognize and sort of feel has like the stamp of legitimacy on it, but is still in graphic novel format.
And maybe like convert it from an or question to an and question to validate that the child, man, they really like graphic novels. That's amazing. Have they thought about reading those and these other things rather than either read graphic novels or something else, to take them off it altogether. But definitely validate that the child's reading something at a very high interest level.
And I saw in our roundtables that there are some books that are kind of transitional books. They have the graphic novel element, but it also has chapters in it. So that's something that you can point out to parents and children as well.
Yeah. I just want to say the thing that we've started saying is we say, well, it's kind of the way the world is. Like how often in the world in our jobs are we looking at graphics and text together? Yeah. It's even a newspaper, a magazine. It's very good for them to learn how to read that. And people seem to understand that too. And then the other thing that we've thought about doing, and I would love to hear if other people have done this, is this came up at one of the panels at Winter Institute, is mixing in the like highly illustrated was it you? It was you. Okay. Okay, I'm going to just stop then. We'll talk later. But in with the prose books, because we do have kids that like will not go to the prose books because they feel like they don't have the stamina, I think. And so we do encourage family read alouds. I've thought about starting a family book club. I don't know if anyone has done that. Okay, well, so I'm going to talk to you later. Okay, yeah, so that's all, because we're trying to address all of those things too in our store.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. That's our time, but we are still up here and feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!